What I'm going to talk about today is a little bit off brand, I guess. It's about a tour that I took. I'm a bit of a tour snob. Like, I think that anyone that does a tour, anyone that does a tour that they care about a great deal, like we did, you could tell that about other tour companies. And this tour that we took back, I think it was about 2017. I think we took it again in 2019 in San Francisco. It's called the Magic Bus Tour. As I was reviewing this video, I realized that it wasn't until halfway through that I told you that the tour doesn't exist anymore. This is my recollection of, I think, my favorite sightseeing tour I've ever taken, ever. And you can't take it anymore, unfortunately. So this isn't an advertisement for it. This is just my sharing a really cool tour. Also, I want to acknowledge the people at the Antenna Theater and Chris Hardman's people. I'm using some of their clips from their promotional videos in here. 90% of the clips that you're going to see here in this video are my own, but there are a couple that I've got from different news sources and from their own website. So acknowledgments to them. This is probably the greatest tour I've ever taken, and I took it at least twice. Tori and I were in a diner in San Francisco. We were visiting it with my sister and my brother-in-law, and we were having breakfast. And then I saw this psychedelic bus drive by, and a big bus, and bubbles are coming off of it. And it was all painted different colors, and literally this bubble machine, and it was going down the street, and it said, "The Magic Bus, it's a trip." And I'm like, this, I've got to know, because anyone that knows me knows that I'm like obsessed with the 60s. And 69 mostly, but the Summer of Love is such an important period of time in pop culture history that I had to know what that was. And we looked it up, and the Magic Bus was a real tour. And so we booked tickets, really not knowing a whole lot except for what the bus looked like and the brief description of the tour on their website. So we booked it. And it is San Francisco. It's not a sightseeing tour of San Francisco, the city, as in the historic aspects of it, but it's like a sightseeing tour of the Summer of Love of 1967, of the hippies, of the Beat generation. And you're in Union Square. That's where you're supposed to meet the guide. And the guide is a hippie, and she shows up, and she checks you in. She introduced herself as Artemis. And she, on all the hippie gear with the granny glasses and the love beads, and completely, like, we're like, wow, this is pretty intense. And then she checks us all in, and the bus pulls up.
I want to get on this bus.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Is this really it? Is this the Magic Bus to 1967?
Yay!
Wow! Welcome aboard.
All right.
I mean, when you walk onto this bus, it's really not overwhelming in a bad way. But I mean, the music is playing, the incense hits you, and the multiple colors as you're on there. It was pretty intense and pretty wonderful. I'm still mesmerized by the whole thing, because you get on the bus, and buses are set up so all the seats are facing forward. Well, all those seats were taken out of this bus, and there's one sort of right down the middle of it, and everything was facing out. And so you're literally facing the windows, and there's half on the left, half on the right, facing out those windows. It's a 90-minute virtual tour of the 60s Summer of Love aboard a vintage transformed passenger bus. The production invoked San Francisco's past through a mix of oral histories, rock and roll live actors, and video projections while the bus rolled through the North Beach, Haight-Ashbury, and the Golden Gate Park. Now, it was invented by a guy named Chris Hardman, and he had the Antenna Theater Company, and it was done in 2010. I think it was to celebrate. It was an art installation, and it was done for the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love, and it became so successful, and people asked for it so often that they decided to do it for like a regular gig. So they bought the bus and they started doing the tours. So as you're sitting down in the bus, Artemis says, I wrote some of these down because it was so cool. I mean, you are immersed in it. They say it's not a tour, it's a trip, and it's just that way. I can't tell you how excited I was. I still am about it. And unfortunately, I guess I should have prefaced this. the tour doesn't exist anymore. I just had this footage of it and the souvenirs from it, and I wanted to share it with you because it's sort of on theme with what we do. It's a little bit different. And Artemis said, "Welcome, my brothers and sisters. This is your family now, your tribe." As we step on the bus, and she says, "We're not just commuting; we're a commune." And they hand out these. They hand out these handouts. These little. I mean, how good is this? It's just printed up. It's 3D. And why the magic bus? In the beginning, everything was the same. Just a lot of hot hydrogen and gas filled the entire universe. But then, as things got cooler, this boring sameness began to morph into phantasmagorical worlds. But they give you these magic glasses. Okay, these are 3D glasses. And as you sit down on your chair and you're looking at the window, well, below it is this wallpaper, and you put on this, and the wallpaper inside the bus is 3D, and you know, it's like the whole thing is all set up. There's nothing left to you know, they've covered each detail. The invention of the magic bus. They bought a 1995 Carpenter bus and created it. The audio track. Who's the guy? Actually, Chris Hardman is the guy who did the Walkman tour of Alcatraz. If you've ever done that, it was so good. And so they in 2010 is when they started this tour with the micro video projector. And so when you get on the bus and they start touring through the streets of San Francisco, you're looking at the streets of San Francisco today, trying to forget what the real world is like right then. Then the windows in the bus, these shades would roll down, and they turned into a projection screen. And you'd be driving through the streets of San Francisco, and the bus is projecting it on the windows. So it's this whole immersive experience of the drive through San Francisco. And then it would get to a point where they'd stop and they talk about the history of, I don't know, say the Jefferson Airplane House. And they're playing White Rabbit while you're in the bus. And up comes those shades, and you're right in front of the Jefferson Airplane House. They did this several times throughout the tour. And one time was the City Lights bookstore, which is where the sort of beat generation was a sort of a hub of all that, the Kerouac business, and Allen Ginsberg. When he was put on, they published Howl. I heard he was charged with obscenity for that, but it became a focal point of the beat generation. Now, beatniks became a negative term that people used to refer to the beat generation as. Beatniks was actually not a nice term. But it's something that's been embraced since then. You get to the Haight-Ashbury district, and they talk about, it's the corner of Haight and Ashbury, and there's the famous clock that's on the corner that the clock stopped working and it's stuck at 4:20 all the time. And they talk about the head shops and the way it was back then, how everyone just sort of gravitated. It was just enough so you can actually get away from thinking the way it really is. You know what I mean? You're there and you're like, the music's playing and it's multicolored, and there are still touches of it at the Haight-Ashbury district of the stores and things like that. But it was just enough to not really focus on the way things really are. It was an escape. And there are parts of San Francisco that aren't very nice. The Haight isn't all that very nice anymore, but they're going on about what a wonderful sort of idyllic place it was in 1967 during the Summer of Love. And the guides never break character, and they're just so kind. And I remember Artemis gave us a flower to put behind your hair, as the Scott McKenzie song. If you're going to San Francisco, make sure to wear a flower in your hair. I don't know. It's the pop culture aspect of the hippie generation in San Francisco, and you do go to Hippie Hill, which is in Golden Gate Park, and you stop at the conservatory, and that's where the restroom break was during the tour. And they said it was like the generator of all the flower power in San Francisco. Before we got back on the bus at the Golden Gate Park, Artemis came around with this basket, and in it were these mints that looked like this. I saved my little mint thing too. And as we're taking the mints, it was sort of like, with like the sugar tab when they were doing the sugar cubes when they do LSD, and she didn't say anything really. She was just smiling and giving everyone one of these things. And Troy said, "Is this acid?" And she goes, "Do you want it to be?" And Troy goes, "Yeah." She goes, "Then it is." And so it was like I said, it just wasn't ironic. It was fun. They got into it, and then it's like an acid trip. They started doing all the crazy lights inside, and the music, the sitar music was playing. And they went through Chinatown, and they were talking about how Eastern philosophies made it. With there was Buddhism, and then there was the transcendental meditation, and the Nehru jackets, and it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a San Francisco history tour. It was a summer of love pop culture celebration. It was so wonderful. The blends past and present in a psychedelic journey through San Francisco's rich counterculture history. The 2-hour trip aboard a brightly painted vintage bus weaves a visual narrative of San Francisco from beatniks to the summer of love and beyond. So it was just not ironic. It was legit. The guides were having such a good time. They put down the windows of the bus and they yelled at people peace and love and wave, and the bubble machine is going, and they're playing such good music. But the Golden Gate Park is where they had the first bee-in, the human bee-in 1967, where I guess like 20 or 30,000 people showed up for that. And it's also where Earth Day kicked off in 1970. I think I can remember Artemis. I can remember Tree Flower was her name, was the other guide that showed us around. We went to the financial district. They talked about the financial system, the man, and capitalism. She says you can see all the people slaving away and the big man on top making all that money. Then they hit on the negative stuff too. Not everything, obviously.
Program to bring you a special bulletin from ABC Radio. Here is a special bulletin from Dallas, Texas. 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade today in downtown Dallas, Texas. This is ABC Radio. To repeat, in Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade today.
After the shooting, the president of the Board of Supervisors, Dianne Feinstein, spoke.
Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
Stay tuned to your ABC station for further details.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
Senator Robert Francis Kennedy died at 1:44 a.m. today, June 6, 1968.
Stay tuned to your ABC station for further details.
They didn't hit on Manson, who was there in 1967. So that part they kind of left out. When I asked Artemis about it, I said I do a tour called the Helter Skelter tour about the Manson thing back in LA. She goes, "Oh, people really do that?" Like she was really, she didn't really get that, which I understand too, because a lot of people just didn't do that. But I mean, a lot of people don't want to go there. But I remember they talked about one of the demonstrations, and it was an anti-Nixon demonstration. And you remember how at these demonstrations they had those paper mache heads of the political figures, and somebody actually came out of the back of the bus wearing this head and walking through the aisles. It was like they had to have 3 people. It was Artemis, the host, they had the driver, and whoever that was, probably doing the technical stuff in the back with the lights, because they did a moon thing, a rocket to the moon, where they had the blast off, and everyone, everyone's supposed to pretend like we're taking off. It was so much fun. Another thing that's said in this book: thousands of America's school buses were purchased and repurposed. That is, transcendentally transformed into a multicolored rock and roll rockets heading for the ultimate galactic Camelot, which was for most folks San Francisco. And Manson actually did that in the opposite way. San Francisco is where he picked up Mary Brunner and Squeaky, Lynette Frome, and they got onto a bus and came down to LA. So these buses were pretty famous, but the invention of the magic bus was really spectacular. They said that the bus ran on positive energy, and if only it was that lucky, because we were in the tour company business for years in Los Angeles, the state of California, and they make it so difficult to run a tour company with all the emissions and standards and inspections. And I understand a lot of it's for safety, but the emissions business doesn't make any sense. Our buses are brand new, and we still had to suffer through all that, analyzing everything we did. But unfortunately, the Magic Bus was shut down for that reason. They say that the Magic Bus is not permitted to roam San Francisco streets until it meets California's modern emission requirements. So since it was a 1995 bus, in order to legally run on the streets of California, they had to have their engines modified or replaced to accommodate the more strict emission standards. Now, it doesn't make any sense, too, because if you own a vehicle in California and it's made in 1975 or earlier than 1975, you're exempt from any of that. So, like, the worst polluters on the planet, with these big old chugging cars, don't have to do emissions. And like us, like the Magic Bus, thousands of people took this tour. They came to San Francisco to see the hippie thing and experience the hippie thing. And they can't do that anymore. And they were technically generating money for the state of California. But you can't, what we've come to know is that you can't do what you love like that and be successful unless you have all the money in the world and you don't need it. Unless you don't need money. Because this is clearly a labor of love for this company, for Chris Hardman and the Antenna Theater. And I believe his wife still runs the Antenna Theater if it still exists. But the Magic Bus Tour doesn't. And it's so sad because so many people won't be able to experience what an amazing thing it was. I mean, it was the videos, the music, the announcements, the whole feel of it. They never broke character. It never got tedious. And it was genuinely a magical experience. And I'm glad I have this at least to remember it by, because it was really, really special. Everyone's invited to take a tour on the Magic Bus. It runs all year round, but our schedule changes seasonally. Oh, man. So unfortunately, no one can enjoy the Magic Bus anymore because of strict regulations revolving pollution, even though lots of things are acceptable. But the Magic Bus Tour is gone. Thank you very much to Chris Hardman, who invented it, and Artemis and all the guides who worked there and put this thing together, the driver. It literally was a Magic Bus, and I think it's so sad that you'll be able to experience. I wish they documented it, but I guess there is no way you can experience it. And plus they wouldn't have rights to all the music either, too, which would be a big part of it. But anyway, I wish you all could have experienced this because it was wonderful. So thanks for joining me today, and have a great day. Peace.